Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2022 Pennsylvania Senate and gubernatorial elections and why neither of these races I think are toss-ups right now. Now, before I get into it, because I know someone's going to take this out of context, I don't like that I have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyways. This is not me saying that Dr. Oz has a 0% chance of becoming Pennsylvania's next senator. This is not me saying that there's no chance that Fetterman loses. This is not me saying this race is safe Democratic. This is me saying that this race is not a toss-up. Fetterman is clearly the favorite right now, and while there's time for that to change, I don't think it will, and I think that lean Democratic, lean, not likely, not safe, lean, because again, there's a big difference between lean Democratic and safe Democratic. Lean is the best rating and the most accurate rating to the electorate for this race as of right now. I'm mostly saying this because there have been a lot of takes recently, especially from the Cook Political Report, which actually moved Pennsylvania back to a toss-up. They had it as lean Democratic, moved it back to toss-up because of, I think, one poll that literally had Fetterman up by 6%. It was this poll. Suffolk had him up by 6%. And they were like, well, clearly that must be a toss-up, which I don't even understand why. Although Cook, in fairness, I don't really think anyone likes Cook anymore. They haven't really been doing very well with their predictions and their ratings, and their House map is very inconsistent. Their Senate map, until they moved Pennsylvania back to toss-up, they had Pennsylvania and Colorado in the same category. They had them both as lean Democratic when, in reality, Colorado's likely Democratic and Pennsylvania's lean Democratic. Colorado's going to be, at least 4 to 5% bluer than Pennsylvania. It'll probably be closer to, I want to say, 7% bluer if I had to guess. But, let's just talk about this Senate race first. We'll talk about the governor's race too, because that's important as well. But let's talk about the Senate race. Dr. Oz has not led in a single poll. Not a single poll. Not even Trafalgar, the poll that had Trump winning Pennsylvania. Not even Susquehanna, the poll that also had Trump winning Pennsylvania. Not even Insider Advantage, which is a Republican-commissioned pollster that had Donald Trump winning Pennsylvania. All of those polls, as of right now, have John Fetterman winning the Senate race. That says a lot about the race, because it proves that even the Republican polling firms cannot find a lead for Dr. Oz. And if you look at these polls, it's not like they're have a ton of undecideds either. Fetterman's at 48%, Oz is at 46%. We'll see what they said in 2020. Trafalgar in 2020 had Trump up by 2%. Let's take a look at our next poll, Insider Advantage. They have Fetterman up by 3%, 45% to 42%. So a fair amount of undecideds, but the fact that Oz is at 42% in a Republican poll is really bad. What did they say? Well, Insider Advantage in 2020, they had Trump up by 1%. Finally, Susquehanna, which again is I think they're actually a decent pollster. Again, they are Republican and they tend to underestimate Democratic support. But look, they're a good pollster. I think they do fairly well in Pennsylvania, and I don't really think that they are super biased. But they're Republican leaning. It's worth pointing it out. But I think there's some to be gained from their polls, unlike Trafalgar, which is I think blatantly very sketchy. Well, let's take a look at Susquehanna. They have Fetterman up by 5%. He's at 49% in this poll. He's up by 5 in Susquehanna. In 2020, they had Donald Trump winning Pennsylvania by 1%. They had him at 49% of the vote. So even the Republican polls that had Donald Trump winning Pennsylvania are showing Dr. Oz trailing. And what about the polls that were good in Pennsylvania? Let's talk about Marist. They had Biden up by 4%. I don't think they polled Pennsylvania yet. Actually, they have. They have Fetterman up by 10%. I have this in my spreadsheet here. Let's go here to Marist, if I can find where they did this poll, because Fetterman up by 10 in Marist. They were pretty good in Pennsylvania. They had, they had Trump only losing it by 3. If you look at Monmouth, they had Biden up by 5. What do they say? Monmouth, they haven't had 538, but Monmouth has Fetterman up by 5. So all the polls that are good in Pennsylvania 2020 have Biden up by mid to high single digits, maybe even 10 in the case of Monmouth or in the case of Marist. All of the polls that are Trump winning Pennsylvania have Fetterman narrowly eking it out. And then we have some, other polls like Center Street PAC that have Fetterman up by double digits. We have, another poll, I think it was Blueprint that had Fetterman up by 9. Beacon Research had him up by 13. And then we had one Republican pollster, Fabrizio Lee and Associates, which I don't think they did a Pennsylvania 2020 poll, but Fabrizio Lee and Associates is Donald Trump's pollster. It was Donald Trump's pollster. They have Fetterman up by 6. So literally, Dr. Oz can't find a lead in a single poll, and that doesn't. And when you're down in every single poll, even Republican internals. And by the way, there are private internals too, to my knowledge, and I know some of the private internal polls. To my knowledge, I don't think Dr. Oz is winning in any of them. I really have not heard anything about Dr. Oz being ahead in any recent internal polls. And again, there was a tweet that came out. It was like, oh, well, from someone who worked at the Cook Political Report, oh, well, there are polls that aren't public polls. Okay. If Dr. Oz is tied or leading in his own internals, why wouldn't he release them? Because right now he's losing in every poll. Republicans have been losing confidence in him. And yes, he can still win, but like, this was a race that was leaning Republican universally even 4 or 5 months ago. It's now a race that is, some people have toss-ups. I have it lean Democratic. Some people even have likely Democratic. Okay? So if there are these polls internally that have Dr. Oz winning, I'd love to see him release them because they would get him some donations. They'd show that he's not done because, some people even think he's dead on arrival. I don't think that yet, but he's not running a good he's not running a good campaign. So I would love to see the Dr. Oz internal polls that have him tied or ahead because, to my knowledge, they don't exist, but whatever. So, yeah, Fetterman's up by 6.6%, fairly healthy lead for a state where Biden won by 1.2. And if you compare the 2020 polls, Biden was up by 4.7% on election day 2020, and he won by 1.2. So it's, even if you think there will be another 3.5 point polling error, which, by the way, in midterm elections, polling errors tend to evaporate in most states. Again, there will still be some level of a polling error everywhere, but like in the 2018 midterms, the polls were pretty spot on in Pennsylvania. And so even if you assume there's a 2020 style polling miss, which is, I think, the max polling miss, realistically, Fetterman will win by 3.1%. If you think there'll be a 2018 style polling miss, I think he'd win by like 6, maybe like half a point less than he's up by right now. So like, yeah, Fetterman, no matter how much error adjustment you do, is still winning. So to prove this, I made my own spreadsheet. I did my own average. I tossed out the Center Street polls because Center Street and some of these other super PACs are like super biased and they aren't really that good of pollsters. But anyways, they show ludicrous results that kind of skew the average. So I tossed those polls out, but I do keep an insider advantage. I keep in Trafalgar, I keep in Susquehanna, which again are more Republican-leaning pollsters, by the way. This isn't me just only ostracizing Republican pollsters. In fact, I have ostracized more Democratic polls than I have Republican polls in Pennsylvania. And I even adjust for 2020 Monmouth. They were up by 1.9% in 2020. That's adjusted. And if there were no, if there's like no evidence of a poll, being off in 2020, like if they didn't release their 2020 polls, like Signal, for example, I just applied 2-point shift to the Republicans just because that's the uniform shift nationwide that we saw in all the swing states. I did the math. The average state, the average margin of underestimation in a swing state for Donald Trump was just over 2%. So apply the 2% swing to all the polls that don't show their 2020 polling error. Fetterman's up by 5.3%. This is a Republican-friendly metric. This is a metric that shows basically the max polling error towards Republicans, and Fetterman's still up by 5.3%. This is not a toss-up race. Dr. Oz can still come back. He still has time. He's gaining a little bit of momentum. The base is consolidating around him a bit more than it was a few months ago. So yes, he's probably going to lose by less now than he would have lost by if the election were held in August. That being said, I do not think this race is a toss-up. I don't think he's going to win. And this is, by the way, this is coming from someone who said he was going to win. Like, I made a video saying he was basically guaranteed to win as recently as June. Okay, I was very, very wrong on John Fetterman. John Fetterman has exceeded my expectations as a candidate. He's done a lot better than I thought he would. He's gotten much more donations than I expected him to get. In addition to that, he is running a much better campaign, a much more disciplined campaign, and a much more appealing campaign to Pennsylvanians than I thought he was going to be able to run. John Fetterman has exceeded my expectations as a candidate. Dr. Oz has underperformed my expectations as a candidate. Dr. Oz, I thought, would be able to be a moderate, uniting candidate who would be able to do very well in the Philadelphia suburbs. He's terrible in the rural areas. He's fading fast with white working class voters. And he is just not really getting that appeal to suburban Philly that I thought he'd get. The Dobbs decision hurts, obviously. Not all of it is his fault, but the campaign he's been running has been very negative, very anti-Fetterman, rather than, I'm Dr. Oz. I'm a nice TV doctor who knows how to work with both sides because I'm a nice guy, right? He gave up on that a long time ago because he's not a popular guy. Dr. Oz was able to somehow make the cringe New Jersey. By the way, there are legitimate concerns about Dr. Oz living in New Jersey and not in Pennsylvania, right? I get that. But the fact that this attack of him living in New Jersey has stuck for so long when it should have just been a 2-week story and just, kind of evaporated is terrible. Fetterman has been able to brand Dr. Oz the way that he's been able to brand Dr. Oz. That's good for him because the goal of this campaign was to kind of Mitt Romney Dr. Oz into looking like an out-of-touch elitist from, coastal New Jersey instead of, cool John Fetterman who's going to fight for Pennsylvania, right? Like that was Fetterman's line of attack. It's been working. And Dr. Oz hasn't been able to find a response. Yes, he's been hammering Fetterman on crime. Yes, Fetterman is a bit less popular now than he was 2 months ago. That being said, he's still more popular than Dr. Oz in every poll we've seen. He's still leading Dr. Oz in every poll we've seen. And even the Republican pollsters cannot find a lead for Dr. Oz. This is not a toss-up race. It doesn't resemble a toss-up race. It's not a toss-up race when your approvals are consistently, or when your disapproval rate is consistently at 50% or more. It's not a toss-up race when you can't lead a single poll. It's certainly not a toss-up race when there are, whispers within your own party. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but there have been whispers in the past within the GOP of just abandoning you. Dr. Oz can still win. I do not think he's going to. Let's talk about the governor's race, because I think this race is even less of a toss-up than the Senate race. In fact, I think this race is bordering on likely Democratic. Josh Shapiro, the incumbent Attorney General of Pennsylvania, he outran Biden by 4% in 2020. He won by 5%, when Biden won by 1%, is beating Doug Mastriano in the polls by 10.6% of the vote. This race is not a toss-up, quite frankly. There has never been a polling error big enough in a state as polled as Pennsylvania to get a lead for Josh Shapiro or for Doug Mastriano. He's down by 10.6% in the polls. He even in, look at the polls, Insider Advantage. Literally at Trump winning Pennsylvania. He's down by 15. Trafalgar, Trump winning Pennsylvania, he's down by 2, so I guess he's within the margin of error, but it's also Trafalgar. If you look at Susquehanna, the poll that they did, if I can find it here, wherever it was from, Susquehanna, did not release a governor poll, but if they had Fetterman up by 5, they probably would have had Shapiro up by like 8 or 9, so worth saying. But yeah, the best poll for Mastriano has literally been Trafalgar because he's down by 2. And again, as we know, Trafalgar is a very pro-Mastriano pollster, and it's a very unique pollster in that their crosstabs and their methodology are very, there's skepticism there. And additionally, Trafalgar had Trump winning Pennsylvania, so I don't really, the fact that even they can't find a lead for Mastriano is not good for him. And Mastriano seems to be so desperate to find a lead in the polls, he's been retweeting fake polls. I think he retweeted like a prank poll from a high schooler, from some high school student that had him winning. He then retweeted a fake poll from someone known as like Big Penguin Polling, which is a pretty funny name in fairness. Like, I don't want to take away from that. If it's a joke, good on them, because it is a very, very funny joke that someone put like a picture of a penguin and we're like, okay, I'm making polls now. The Big Penguin polling had Fetterman, or had Mastriano beating Dr. Shapiro by like 3%, I want to say, and he retweeted it. So Mastriano doesn't have internals because I don't think he has the money to fund internals. He doesn't have the ability to, create any sort of ground operation because here's the thing. Shapiro's from the Philadelphia suburbs. Mastriano is a terrible candidate for the Philadelphia suburbs. We know this. And the thing with Mastriano is that the case for him was that he'd be able to crank up turnout in the rural areas. He hasn't been able to do that. He hasn't been able to engineer anything in the rural areas. And so, when you have no money, no ability to get a turnout operation, it's very, very hard to win. And when you're down by like big in every poll, even the polls that had Trump winning Pennsylvania in 2020, it's not a toss-up race. I know like your radical politics is of the world, and like your people on Twitter will, like, there are some people on Twitter who still think Mastriano's favorite to win somehow. I don't know how there's like that level of delusion, but it does exist, unfortunately. He's down 11 points in the polls. You need a polling error from Uzbekistan and back to get halfway there, and even then, it's like we're not even going to get that. I will be stunned if Mastriano wins on election day. He's in a borderline likely Democratic race, and it's a shame for the Republican Party because they could have won this race had they ran Lou Barletta or Bill McSwain or even Dave White. Would have done better against Josh Shapiro, who, again, Josh Shapiro is a good candidate in his own right, but Doug Mastriano is just a terrible candidate who does not know how to appeal to Pennsylvania, and the fact he's down big in every poll is just really bad for him. So, this race is not a toss-up. Pennsylvania, I expect to go fully blue. I think Shapiro win by 5, and that's, by the way, that's conservative. I've seen people who think he wins by like 8 or 9. I could honestly see that. I think at this point he's going to win by 5, but that's, again, conservative estimate. I think Fetterman will win by 2. So it's close to tilt D. I might move back to tilt D if the polls keep closing. But this is, it's not a toss-up race. Fetterman's clearly the favorite, and I will keep acting that way until the data changes, but I don't think it will. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you all next one. Bye, everyone.